Welcome, everyone, to Women in Echo. It's my very distinct pleasure this evening to welcome Dr. Sasha Shillcutt, who is a professor of cardiac anesthesia and vice chair of strategy at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. She's also a gender equity researcher, founder and CEO of Brave Enough, and author of Brave Boundaries, her second book on empowering women. Her first book was Between Grit and Grace. We are thrilled to have her with us this evening, and welcome, Sasha.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here with all of you and just talk a little bit about my book. I thought I'd open up, and if it's okay with you, just share a little bit about why I wrote the book, and then we can get into some questions. And we want this to be really engaging, and we want to share and learn from each other. I think peers to peer learning is so important, and it's something that honestly many times we miss out on because of our work days and our workflow. We don't get to learn from each other or even talk to each other. We're kind of isolated and in silos all day, working with patients or working in our labs or whatever we do for a living. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm hoping that we can have a good discussion tonight. So I am a cardiac anesthesiologist at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha and a professor there. And I've been in academia my whole career. And basically, I kind of shot out of the gate, I would say, as a young junior faculty, like many of you probably. I really wanted to I just wanted to be successful. I really wanted to make a mark. I fell in love with echocardiography. I fell in love with TE. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of people that I saw ahead of me. And what that led to was a very early successful career for me, and overachieving, overfunctioning, being overcommitted. However, at the same time, feeling more and more and more burned out. And in 2013, I think I'd been out for about 8 years. I'd made associate professor. I had 4 kids under the age of 10. And I felt completely and totally burned out. And on paper, I looked really good. You know, I had all these things. Like I had an NIH grant, and I was speaking on stages, and I had a lot of manuscripts that were coming out, but inside I felt really empty. And I would go to work in the morning and I would sit in my car and kind of cry a little bit, honestly, trying to figure out how I was going to go into work and do my job. And then I would come home at night and I would pull into my garage and I would cry for a few minutes, trying to figure out how I was going to go inside and be a mom. And that led me to ask myself some really hard questions. And some of those questions were, why are you on this path to achieving so much that you have lost yourself? Why are you overcommitting? Why do you struggle to say no? Why do you think that you have to do everything that everyone asks of you, whether it's on your job description or not? And you're not, and really just look at how unhealthy I was and how I had let myself just kind of become either doctor or mother, and there was no Sasha. So in a short story, I took about a year to say no, and I'd never really said no. And I learned how to say no over the course of a year. And in that course of a year, I learned a lot about myself. I learned how much of a people pleaser I was and how afraid I was to disappoint anyone. And through that journey of overcoming burnout, spending time with myself every day, setting boundaries, I really I built a community of women that grew to my company, Brave Enough, that has thousands of women doctors in it. And I thought I had it figured out. I was like, okay, I know now how to not burn out. I know I have to do these things and spend time with myself. I know I need other physician women that it peers that I can help hold me accountable. I know I need to be honest about what I can and cannot do and set limitations on that. And then 2020 hit. And I don't know about any of you, but I found myself back to burnout. And this time I was burning out doing things I like to do. I was saying yes to all the things I wanted to do, but I was just totally burned out. I'm sure all of you face similar struggles that I faced in 2020, where I felt like I had to make sure my family was okay, my elderly parents were okay, my patients were okay, that I was okay, that I was protected. Like it was just so much. And I felt really ashamed this time that I was burned out, which I didn't really feel the first time. And I thought, this is really embarrassing. I'm a coach. I'm supposed to have this all figured out. So the short story is that I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, I think you need to talk to a therapist. I think that you are so stressed out that you need another voice. And I thought, really? I don't feel depressed, or I don't know that I have anxiety or depression. She's like, just go to a therapist. She's a psychiatrist. And she basically kind of course corrected me. So I went to a therapist in 2020 and I said, I'm trying to do all these things. I need to take care of the community of women that I serve. I need to take care of my patients. I need to take care of my parents and my kids and all these things. And she said, you need boundaries. You don't have any boundaries. And I was like, I don't. And she's like, no. And I said, aren't boundaries for people in like toxic relationships or going through something with someone in their family? And she's like, you have a toxic relationship with yourself. And I was like, what? Like it was like mind blowing. And I thought, really? And she's like, you have no boundaries with yourself. You are putting all of these responsibilities on yourself. You are not saying no. You are answering every email, every text, every direct message. People have access to you 24/7. And if you don't respond to someone that needs your help, you feel guilt. And you have this hero complex that is not serving you. It's actually really unhealthy. And man, that hit me like hardcore. And so I did what we do as clinical scientists. I went out and started Googling boundaries, and I read everything about boundaries. And I was like, there's not a book about boundaries for the everyday professional, especially working in healthcare. And at the same time, there was a lot of workplace data coming out from McKinsey, from Forbes, from Harvard Business, all these workplace data, because our workforce was really struggling, right? People were leaving healthcare in droves. People weren't showing up to work, all these things. Our workforce was stressed. So I was looking at this data, and interestingly, much of the data that was coming out said we have lost all work-life boundaries in COVID. People are working from home. They think that's a good thing, but actually they're working 16 hours. They're throwing in laundry between Zoom meetings, but then they're in their inbox at 10 or 11 p.m., which was me, and we have no boundaries. Like, are they at home? Can I call them because they're working from home, or are they at home, like not working? Like there's just no boundaries, right? So I thought, I need to get back to boundaries myself. I don't understand how I'm a physician who's taken years of schooling, and I've taken every leadership course out there. I've taken the Harvard courses, and nobody's ever given me a lecture on boundaries. Like this therapist, one session with her was the first time that I actually was introduced to this concept. So that's why I wrote the book, because I think that we often, especially in healthcare, where we go into to the practice of medicine or taking care of patients in whatever realm that we take care of. I know we have not everyone on is a physician, and you don't have to be to burn out in healthcare. Whatever realm you're in, we go into medicine to serve and to take care of people. And it's a very altruistic, selfless goal. And it's a good goal. It's there. We do it because we care about people, because we want to improve people's lives. That is a very easy mission and life mission and vision for yourself to get twisted and to be taken advantage of, quite frankly. And then you add the stress of our workforce and the shortages, and now it's even more easy for us to feel guilty saying no or setting boundaries, which are critical for our own health and well-being. So I hope that if you read the book, or if you didn't, no problem. I'm glad you're here. You don't need to read the book to be here tonight. But I hope that in the book, at the end of each chapter, if you do go through it, I really hone in on what are your boundaries? Where do you have good boundaries? Where do you have bad boundaries? Where do you not have any boundaries? What are boundaries? What boundaries do you need? And how to enforce boundaries? Because a boundary in your head, I say, is not a boundary. it's not a boundary till you speak it and you communicate it with the people that you work with and live with. So that's the book, and it's helped me tremendously know how to stay well and how to really recover from burnout. So if anybody has any comments or questions, I know Dr. Thaman is going to kind of like moderate, but throw those in the QA, because we would love to hear comments and questions. And Ritu, did you have something you wanted to kind of comment first?
Sure. Yes. There are so many. I was saying to Sasha earlier, when I read this book, there were so many amen moments of reading and relating to some of the sentences and the content. Like one of the first, it's like we're supposed to be part Marine, part Mary Poppins, and part Florence Nightingale. And I love her description of our family, aka boyfriend, otherwise known as Pete Personal, cannot possibly know that we are in fact seriously dating boyfriend 2, aka William Work. And just so clever how you put into words these feelings and in these relationships that we all have so succinctly, in a way that is completely relatable. Even if you know you're in a bad relationship, you need to do something about it. And one of the things that really resonated was one sentence where you say, everyone in my professional and personal life was used to me saying yes to every situation. In the workplace, I constantly witnessed women colleagues exhausted from doing unpaid work and extra tasks they were assigned. And it reminded me of this Times article that was written. The business of healthcare depends on exploiting doctors and nurses. And I wonder if you could elaborate a little more on that, because I think you say it very clearly.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I do a lot of coaching, and I lead coaching classes for women physicians specifically. And it's really interesting. I've also published data on this, on something called citizenship tasks. And if most of the time, if you ask people what is burning them out, it's not the things that they're paid to do. If we actually did what was on our job description, we probably would have better boundaries and we would not be burned out. But many of us find ourselves in jobs where we are taking on work that we are not paid to do, but that needs to get done. And these are things like, everything from serving on committees to taking minutes at a meeting to doing DEI work, which is often unpaid, or organizing events, or just kind of taking care of one another, wellness stuff, recruitment, things like that, recruiting people, going to dinners for recruitment, a lot of things that people are asked to do that they're not paid to do. And they find themselves feeling bad if they say no. And then on the other side of it, it is the clinical work that oftentimes we are paid to do, but we are not paid. What we aren't paid to do is the added calls, the added things that we're covering, those extra patients that we're being asked to see late in the evening or early in the morning, or the work that we're asked to do at night and on the weekends. And so it's a complicated situation because, again, most of us are in this work because it's human work and we want to serve other people and help other people. And so suddenly you have this ethical dilemma where you're asked to do something that you're actually not being paid to do, but you're feeling like, well, I should do this because at the end of the day, it's going to be helpful. And so without boundaries, you will burn out. You will either leave medicine, or you will develop a negative coping behavior, or you will develop stress, which is so unhealthy for our hearts, as we know. And we have to really get back to respecting people's boundaries and respecting people when they say no, and when they are courageous enough and brave enough to say, I actually can't do that work, or I don't have the space or the time, or I'm not paid to do that work.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I love how you punctuate the book with facts. One of the first facts that so you catch our attention. Our world runs on the backs of women with zero boundaries. Our society is constructed for women to keep doing more for less. And what has struck me is that rarely have I ever coached a woman who has told me they need help creating boundaries, saying no, and negotiating for more time or money to accomplish all the things they're continually expected to do for free. I think it's just the recognition that we're actually doing this. Do you feel in your life in Nebraska, have you been able to, say, negotiate with whoever your boss is, for the pay structure, so it's not so much RVU based? Is it based on something that perhaps is a little more equitable? Because I find that RVUs are really not. But
correct. Yeah. So it's different in anesthesia a little bit, because we don't have RVU based compensation. We have something called anesthesia units, which is pretty abysmal as well, because you could make a lot more money doing simple anesthetic cases and quick turnovers than you can doing like an LVAD or something, which requires significant competence and skill to do. So it's different, but I think these are really important. What you're saying is completely true. Very few people understand what it takes to deliver high acuity care and good care. And you can't capture it in an RVU. And very few people understand what it takes to make sure that your employees are taken care of, and that the department runs, or the division runs, or the echo lab runs, right? Like, these are all things that someone has to do this administrative work, and they should be compensated for it, and they should get time for it. One thing that I think I have learned in my career, and I know we have some questions in the chat, we will get to those, is that when I'm asked to do something by someone in power that is in charge of me, or that I answer to, instead of just thinking, like, sitting there and going, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Like, I don't have time to do this, and now they're asking me to do this, I have to do this. I will say, this sounds like really important work that you want me to do. So my question is, what do you want me to stop doing? Because I think oftentimes we just add to our plate. Things just get dumped on us, and we just start to drown, right? But if it's important enough that there's a strategy, like it's part of the strategic plan, that someone above you is asking you to do this task or this project or to take on this new responsibility, then it should be part of your pay, number one. If it's not part of your pay, then that's really bad business. You shouldn't be doing it. So when people say, oh, well, I mean, I just need to do this, you're not going to get paid for it. Well, then why are we doing it? That's not a good use of our resources. It's a bad business practice. And anyone in business will tell you, you should never ask employees to do something that you don't have resources or funding to pay them to do. But if they say, no, this has to be done, I want you to do this. Yes, this is part of your job description. Okay, what do you want me to stop doing? What part of my job description we need to go lower on the priority list and put off for a few months while we concentrate on this? I used to not think about that, and now I think about that every time I'm asked to do something new or a new added task, because otherwise I just end up drowning, and then I'm like feeling undervalued, underpaid, like I'm not being, taken seriously for all the things I do. So we all also forget that most people that we are working for don't really know all the things that we do. We know what we're doing, but they probably don't know what we're doing. And, they have 50, they have 80, my boss has 90 Sasha Shillcutts, right? Like, there's 90 anesthesiologists that go to him with issues. So there's no way that he knows all of my responsibilities. So when he asks me to do something, I'm much more courageous now because of my boundaries to say, I can do that. If you want me to do that, I will have to stop doing something else. What is it that you would like me to stop doing out of these 3 or 2 things? Hopefully that made some sense. There's a question in the chat about saying no to opportunities and that you will be forgotten about. And I love this question, and how to say yes or how to say no. This is a really good question. I just recorded a video on my YouTube channel about this because I get this question all the time, and it's a really good question. I think that you have to know what your career goals are. And it's not, and I think we should know this at any given day. Like, it's not like something like when we're starting out, like people kind of focus on this in early career, but it doesn't matter if you're early, mid, late career. You should know what you love about your work and what excites you and what is your job? Like, what is your mission? And when you get an ask, if it doesn't fit in that mission, it should be a no, for me, at least. Now, when you're young, you may, let's say, you really want to give a talk at the annual meeting. You want to be at sessions and you want to give a talk. And you get asked to give a talk about the tricuspid valve, and you don't care about the tricuspid valve. You would really want to talk about the mitral valve. You're going to probably say yes to that. At least I would, because eventually I'm going to I want to just knock this talk out of the park so that I get asked back, and then somehow I make it on the mitral valve panel about, mitral valve repair and TE, because that's my jam. So that might be a yes, because that's in your long-term goal. But for example, when I was first starting out, I would get asked to give talks about how to induce a patient that had gastroschisis. Now, I literally gave a talk on that. Why did I do that? I look back and I go, what was I thinking? I had no interest in pediatrics. I should not have done that. Like, that was a stupid yes. Like, I should have given it to someone else. But I was so afraid that I would never get asked again, which is a common false belief we have when we have imposter syndrome. It's very common. We all have it. If you are a person who shows up and gets work done, you're going to get asked again and again and again and again. So feel free to say no if it doesn't fit in your mission and your line and your interest. Just say no to it and then move on. I hope that answered that question. Karen asks, often we risk penalty at work by saying no to extra stuff at higher ups wins how to address. I have really found that a very honest answer of no has actually allowed me to gain respect. Now, first, I always say, don't say no to things on your job description. That's a really quick way to get fired. So if it's on your job description, don't say no. Don't opt out of those things. I'm not saying that. But if you're being asked to do something that you just don't want to do because you either don't have the time to do it, or you don't have the passion to do it, or you just have no interest in doing it, just say, this doesn't align with my goals this year. That's what I say, because it's true. And I have learned that I have to find my 20 seconds of brave, because especially if you're not a person if you're a person with no boundaries, this is going to be really hard for you at first, because you love making people happy. And we all love making people happy. We all want to please people. But find what I call your 20 seconds of brave, and just say, thank you so much for asking me to do this. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit in my goals for the year. End of story. You'll get respect much more than if you say yes and you show up and you're negative, or you're like, I don't want to be here. Your face says that in the meeting or on Zoom, or you just sit there disengaged. I mean, I don't know about you, but I want people to be engaged when I ask them to do things and they say yes. So saying no is uncomfortable, but it's actually the right thing to do. Brene Brown says clear is kind, and it's true. I would rather have junior faculty that I ask to write a paper with me. I don't want them to say yes if they're not going to show up and do it. And if they really aren't excited about them, I'd rather have them say no right away so I can move to another person and ask another person. So I know it's scary, especially when it's in a position of power. But if someone asks you, what you don't want to say is, I'm sorry. Because if they're asking you to do something that's not on your job description, when you say, I'm sorry, you're lowering yourself to basically say you're doing something wrong. You're not doing something wrong by saying no to something you're not paid to do or that's not part of your job description. You're just saying no, thank you. I can't do that. Or I have no interest in that, or that doesn't fit with my career goals. That's not an I'm sorry statement. That's not, you're not doing something wrong. You're not committing a foul or an error by saying no to that.
Yeah, that's so helpful. You also say in your book at one point that society does not place the same expectations on working men as it does on working women. And a second important difference is that when men set boundaries, they're respected. When women set boundaries, they're rejected. Is there a way around that? Sasha, tell us the secret sauce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a lot of data in the psychology literature and the workforce literature, if you look at it in workforce strategy and culture, which is something I'm interested in, that shows that if you are a man and you advocate for yourself and you set boundaries, like healthy boundaries, you're really respected for it. People look at you as, someone who knows where they want to go, that you have a very clear, intentional career path, that you are very confident and secure. And when women say no, everybody kind of stops. Like, did she just say no? Like, wait, is she saying no? Wait, is she pushing back? Like, because we don't do it, because we are taught as women that compliance and obedience is how we get ahead. Right? Men are taught in our society, and this doesn't mean men are bad and women are good. That's not what I'm saying. This is just how we are all socialized. And I'm socialized like this. Like, if I sit around a table and one of my male partners is like, we're not doing that. We should not be doing this. I just think it's kind of funny. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like there he goes, like, but if one of my female partners does it, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like, start sweating inside. Like, I get anxious. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. When a woman is sitting around a table and she decides to come out of the dugout, we all get nervous. We're like, is she going to cry? Is her voice going to shake? Is she going to get angry? Is she going to get red? Right? Where we never have that reaction with men, because we're all used to men doing that. We're used to hearing men do that, and it's accepted. So what we need to do is we need to take a deep breath, find our 20 seconds of brave, say no, or share the idea, or say, hey, I think we should do this, or I don't think that's a good idea, or whatever it is. We have to set the boundary, and it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel like we have done something wrong. And we haven't. We've just presented ourselves in a counter stereotype in the workforce than what everybody is used to. So, for example, I share this story in the book, but the first time I started saying no in my workplace, people thought I was joking. I was so bad at saying no. I had never said no for like 8 or 9 years. I just did everything that people asked me to do. I was overly compliant. And when I first said, I'm not doing that, people like laughed. They just didn't take me seriously. And still once in a while, I'll say, no, I'm unable to do that. Or that's actually not my realm. This is someone else's job. Or don't you think this would be better for a person in this role? And this just happened to be last week. I was asked to do something that was clearly meant for someone else's job. And it was like, I didn't get heard. And then 10 minutes later in the meeting, it circled back to Sasha's going to do it. And I went, whoa. 10 minutes ago, I said I wasn't going to do that. How is this now when we're wrapping up this meeting on my plate? That's not going to happen. And you're not going to get fired. You need to, again, don't say no to things you're paid to do. That's not what I'm saying. You will get fired for that. You may, I should say, you're going to be respected, but if you are a woman, you're going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to get backlash at first. And you're going to feel like you're doing something wrong, saying no, because you're not used to stepping into your power and doing that.
It's so well said. Do you think that as more women become brave enough to actually, say no, that stereotype of, we're indifferent, we're lazy if we're saying no, those kind of connotations that are implied. Do you think they'll start to vanish?
Mhm.
Or
Well,
have you
I don't
seen
know if
that?
I don't know if they're going to vanish, but I will tell you something that I have seen firsthand, and I've been doing this work now for about 8 years. That I have seen women get paid for things that 5 to 7 years ago I did for free. And I love that. Like, I love it. I'm seeing men get paid for the same things. And I think that's really smart. And I always tell myself this, like, if you are being asked to do something that is truly like so important that somebody is asking you in power to do this job, if somebody is asking you to do it, it should be a paid task. If it's something that is coming down from administration or coming down from the higher ups, that should be part of the strategic plan of the institution. And that should be a paid task. And that means if you don't have the capacity to do it, you should stop doing something that you're getting paid to do to take on this task. And so I give this example, I talk about this, I've talked about it in my first book, that I did a role for a number of years in my department. And every year when my annual review would come up, I'd say, this takes like several hours of my month. And I work on this for at least 10 hours a month. And I really think I should have a stipend with this role. And I was told every time what many of us are told, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. So after doing this role for 3 years, I finally put my foot down and said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm spending, hours of my life not doing other things that I want to do because I'm doing this role that's unpaid. So at my annual review, I told my boss I was no longer doing this role. And he was like, really? I'm surprised you're so good at it. Well, of course I'm good at it. I work really hard at it, but I'm not getting paid. It's not that I'm bad at it, or else you would have asked somebody else to do it, right? So it's even worse when you're good at the role, and we're all good at these roles. Like, we do it, we show up, we're good people. So I stopped doing it. It was really hard. It was like the first time I ever said no and put my foot down. And then 3 months later, one of my junior faculty came to me and he said, hey, will you help me? Will you share your files on this role? I'm taking over this role. And I was like, oh, you are? Okay. I'm kind of surprised you're doing it because there's no pay associated with it. He said, what are you talking about? I'm getting paid. I said, there's no way I would do all this without getting paid. And so I'm getting paid. And that was the hardest lesson for me to learn. I was so upset, but that is what happens in our workplace every day. And if we think it doesn't, we're kidding ourselves. It happens to women every day. It happens in every person that's on this call. It's happening in your workforce. So it was such a good lesson for me. Now I see a lot of women saying no. And when I say no, and I know the other person is saying no, she's going to get paid. The person coming behind me is going to get paid for what I said no to because there's no pay. That's the right ethical thing to do. It wasn't fair that I didn't get paid, that I took that work for 3 years, but it was the right thing that he's getting paid. Does that make sense? So when you say no to these roles that are unpaid, that you're being asked to do as part of your job or as part of your work hours, you are honestly making things better and more equitable for everyone. And that I have seen more of administration and leaders come around and go, you know what? They're right. If we're asking them to do this, it should be compensated.
Yeah, that's such an important lesson. One other thing that you highlight in your 6 common false beliefs on boundaries is number 5. We're too tired to set the boundary. Mm-hmm. And then you say that this is a common weapon used on women. Wear us down, strike when we are tired, too tired to say no, too distracted to stand up for ourselves, too worn out to set boundaries. What can we do about that? How do we overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it's true, I see this all the time. I coach people I try to make them realize this. When you're tired, a no that is deep within you, and you know it's a no, like someone asks you to do something, like someone says, Dr. Thaman, can you give a lecture next Friday afternoon to the fellows? And the minute they ask you, you know your answer is no, because you're busy, you don't have time, you'd have to prepare a lecture, all these things. You're just too tired to say no. So you say, let me think about it. And then what happens is you don't, or you just ignore the email because you're like, I don't even have time to say no. I don't have the energy to fight this. I don't have the energy to email them back and explain. Then that person sees you a week later, and now you've pushed off the no. And you know what happens? Your no becomes a yes. Your maybe becomes a yes, even though it should be a no, because you're too tired to say no. And it's easier just to do the thing than to actually say no. So this is why I give advice that is counter what a lot of people say out there, where they say, oh, if somebody asks you to do something, take 24 hours and think about it. No, don't take 24 hours. If it's a maybe, take 24 hours, or if it's a possible, take 24 hours. But if somebody asks you and you get a pit in your stomach and you're like, this is a no for me, say no immediately. Get it out of your inbox. Email back immediately and say, I can't do this. That person will actually respect you more because they can go to the next person and ask them to do the thing. Get it out of your inbox, get it out of your brain, get it off your conscious, and don't let the no become a yes, because when we're tired, we get taken advantage of all the time. There's another question in the chat that kind of comes along with this, and it says, do you feel that saying no hurts you on your annual review? No, because, and this is why, I want to overachieve in what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to achieve and have success in my roles. So again, if you're saying no to things that you're not paid to do, or that opportunities that come that you're not really interested in, that means you're going to have the energy to kick out of the park what you're supposed to be doing. I would rather do 5 things really, really well and have massive success on my annual review for 5 things than do 10 things half-ass, so to speak. And sorry, I just don't know a better word than half-ass. That's like, let me know if you know one, because there's not another word to describe that, in my opinion. So it's true. Like, you could do 5, you have time to do 5 things, or you have times to give 50% to 10 things. So I have found that saying no does not hurt me. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't get initial pushback for saying no, because sometimes I do. Just last week, again, I was given like 3 things to do that are not my job, like clearly not my job, someone else's job. And I said, this is not my job. I'm happy to forward this email on to someone who is more skilled in this. And it was like I wasn't heard. And then I was at a meeting 3 days later, and they said, oh, Sasha's going to do that. I said, no, I'm not doing that. That is, again, not my job. So it doesn't mean that I'm heard every time that I say no. Sometimes I have to reiterate things, but I have not received backlash in my annual review for saying no, because I have more time to succeed doing the things I'm supposed to be doing.
I love also, Sasha, in your book, how you say, imagine yourself, you're in a car, you're the driver, and you can have 3 people with you in that car. What are the best strategies that you can think of? Like, how do you choose what 3 people things should be with you?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So this was a big realization for me after I wrote, or when I was writing my first book. I was so excited to write this book, and I got this book deal, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a published author. And I thought, I'm just going to wake up on Saturdays and I'm going to feel energized. And I had this like vision of myself writing a book in the mountains, drinking a cup of coffee, not like with my 4 kids running all around and taking call and all this, which was hysterical. Right. So I realized, like, after 1 chapter of writing 1 chapter, which took me like 2 months, I got to let some stuff go. Like, I will be doing 0 academic publishing this year. Like, there's no space. And I thought, the rest of my life, I am driving a 4-seater car, and that's it. I am not upgrading. I'm not expanding. I have a 4-seater. And there's really only room in my life for me and 3 other priorities. Now, I can let 10 other people in my car and then it's a really uncomfortable ride. Or I can just stick to 3 things at a time. So, I literally sat down and said, I have to rotate off this committee. I can't speak at this conference. I can't be a part of this writing group anymore because I'm writing a book. It was really hard to do, but it's how I finished my book. And I think once a year, I do this every January. I take like a day off every January where I call it my self-retreat. And I sit down and I got this idea from Michael Hyatt, who does it for his company, but I thought I'm just going to do this for my life. And I sit down and I kind of write out like the 3 goals for the year. I used to write out like 20 goals, like I'm going to exercise, 4 days a week, and I'm going to do yoga every Saturday, and I'm going to publish 3 articles, and I'm going to finish that photo album I've been saying I'm going to do for 10 years and all these things. And then, I would accomplish like 3. So now I kind of set every January, like what my goals are for the year and like my 3 things I want to accomplish. And it helps me because if I say, I want to take 4 family vacations this year, like I want to take 4 trips with my kids. They don't have to be big, long, week-long trips, but I want all of us to be together for 4 trips. I cannot be speaking every month and accomplish that goal. So it helps me say, I would love to come to this thing. I want to do it. But Sasha, remember what you're driving this 4-seater car. And this is not the year where you can give that talk. And it just helps us create boundaries when we look at the limits that we truly have in life.
Yeah, I love that analogy and how helpful that is to think of that. And another brilliant thing that you write about in your book is how your dog Jack teaching you boundaries,
Yes.
which I think is just fantastic. Could you elaborate on that? That was a really great part of the book too.
Oh yeah. So when my youngest, or actually my youngest wasn't born yet. When I had 3 kids, my youngest was like 1 year old. My husband brings home this puppy because he wanted a puppy. He's like, oh, our kids have to grow up with a puppy. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I don't need one more heartbeat to take care of. Like, this is all I do every day is listen to people's heartbeats. And then I come home and care for people's heartbeats. I literally said to him, I can't handle one more heartbeat. He said, oh, I'll do all the things for the dog. So of course the dog gets to be about 6 months and I'm like, this dog has to go. He's out of control. He's wild. He runs away. He chews everything. So we get this, my husband knew I was ready to take this dog and just rehome this dog. So he hires this dog trainer and she comes to our house and she says, where's his kennel? I'm like, well, we had a little crate when he was a puppy that he slept in. She's like, no, he needs a crate. He needs like a kennel, like inside. He needs his own little home. And I was like, oh, that's so mean. That's like terrible. And she's like, no, he needs this. You have 4 kids running around here now. It's crazy town in this house. He needs a place to escape. So she was right. And Jack began to love his kennel. Like if the kids were crying or it was mealtime and craziness, he would just totally just saunter out of the stressful area and just hide in his little kennel. And it became his little home and he slept in there and we kept the door open. He just loved being in there, honestly. And I thought, you know what? I need a kennel. I need a kennel in this house. Like we all need a kennel. And I've taught my kids, and now my kids are older, but when they were little, I taught them. I don't have this, this is not my little kennel, but I have a little white couch in my bedroom that I purposely bought that's white and so that no one else can sit on it. And I said to everybody, look, this is like my kennel. And when mom is sitting in this space, I'm decompressing. I'm having a moment. I'm thinking. Sometimes I'm crying in this little space. Leave me alone. Do not bother me unless you're hemorrhaging or dying. Don't come to me. And what I love about it is sometimes you just need that little escape in your house. You need a place where you're just a safe place and has boundaries, especially if you live with a lot of people like I do. But I love that I taught my kids that because they now have that. Like, they're like, I know everybody's going out tonight to the game and going for sushi, but I'm going to stay home tonight. I'm staying in my room. I just need a night off. And I'm like, you know what? This is good. This is good that I've taught my kids how to set boundaries, right?
It's
But please don't
fantastic.
take that wrong and think I lock my kids in kennels. Nobody's in a cage here or anything like that.
Oh, another thing that you clearly state, which is something I think we all have heard and think about too, is that most of us develop our belief system about boundaries from our maternal figure. And you talk about your sharing a room with your sister and how that whole scenario led to some of the things you did as a mother yourself. And do we all need to go into therapy to figure this out, or can we like figure it out without, like, just acknowledge that that's the ground truth, and we can move from there?
No, I share that I went to therapy because I think there's such a stigma around it. And, I am very, blessed that I don't have depression or anxiety, but I know a lot of people do. And I think a lot of physicians and people in healthcare, there's a lot of negative stigma around going to a therapist. And, we would never criticize a therapist for coming and getting a cabbage or getting a TAVR, right? If he or she needed that, but we criticize ourselves for thinking, oh, I can't go to therapy. So I don't think everyone needs to go to therapists to learn their boundaries, but I do think there is a lot of work that suggests, and it's true, that we do learn how to take care of ourselves as women from our maternal mother. And we learn how to let other people take care of us typically from our paternal figure. So if you had a maternal figure who, did not prioritize her self-care, if she was in constant service to others, you're probably going to find yourself that way. And you may have guilt for ever doing anything for yourself or setting boundaries or saying, hey, kids, I need 10 minutes by myself. So I think it is good to kind of think about that and reflect on that and think about how you care for yourself, because we want our patients to be cared for by nurses and doctors and sonographers and pharmacists and perfusionists who take care of themselves and who know how to manage their stress and who know how to set boundaries.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think you make a really important point that there's so much shame in medicine in general as part of the culture, which needs to be eradicated so we could just live our best lives in this regard and not feel embarrassed or ashamed that we feel like this, or that we're setting this boundary, or that we're trying to live the best life that we know, because we don't even understand how to do that.
Right.
And part of the whole burnout, which is particularly high in women, is perhaps a seed of this are those feelings, which really not passed down. We're coming from a very paternalistic place, and we're coming from the term equanimitas, which is what is really taught, like, keep your feelings to yourself, lady, and take care of the patient. That doesn't serve us.
It really doesn't. And I think, I don't even know how many times I would be at work and just feeling like overwhelmed or over exhausted and just did exactly what you described, like push it down, go find some caffeine, keep barreling on. And then when you come home, the last thing you really want to do is talk about it with your spouse or talk about it with your partner and rehash your day. So it just gets pushed down, right? And ignored. And I think there is a lot of strength in learning these skills. These are skills that we have to be nimble and flexible to stay resilient. There's resilience is something that's very dynamic, and it's something that people that are learners get. It's not a toughness. People think that's not what resilience is. It's being able to be nimble and being able to learn and being able to ask for help And so I look back and I share that I went to therapy because I want people to know, like, I didn't figure out these boundaries by myself. I actually went to somebody who's trained in this and an expert in this and knowledgeable in this and taught me this. And I have no problem saying that because I think I want to be a resilient person. I mean, we don't know what's going to come in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, right, in medicine. And we need to have a workforce that is resilient and can say, I'm struggling. I need help. Because the last thing we want is to lose people. We don't want to lose more people out of medicine. So we want to keep them, and we have to get rid of the shame piece that says we should just be able to handle everything that comes our way and just toughen it out.
Yeah, that's so well said, and so important to hear that, that we absolutely need this. And there is got to be a safe space for acknowledging these emotions that might come up, whether they're labeled as positive or negative, or a combination of both. And if you do talk to someone, it's like talking to an educator. You're learning about yourself and how to sort of understand the signals that might come up in the body first before they even manifest, say, in another way, in that space in your head. And I think that it's a real tribute that you're able to do this juggling act between, and with your partner who really understands, the back and forth, the dynamic nature, and you've managed to have all these different parts of your life, and it's seemingly at the same time. But have you been able to just manage all this juggling act, as it were, with concentrations at particular times in your life, you think?
Yes.
Or
yes. I don't want anyone to think I do everything all the time, because I don't. I definitely have years where I am more focused on maybe writing a manuscript or finishing a research project. And then there's years where I don't write anything academically because I'm writing a book. Or there's years where I do neither because my son is going to college, like this last year. And I was like, I'm going to be soaking up every minute with him before my oldest goes away to college. So it is, this career in medicine is a journey, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it looks different for everyone each year of your career. And I think we have to give ourselves massive grace. We also have to realize that we really need each other. And, I think for a long time, I kind of would go to work with like an armor. I mean, I'm a female cardiac anesthesiologist. I work with male cardiac surgeons most of the time. Most of the male cardiologists, the interventionalists, are men. We have Poonam. We have one. She's a female who's an interventionalist. She's awesome. But that means that I work in an environment where most of the people that hear orders and hear directives are from men. So it will beat you down. And I've learned that I used to come in with like this hard armor, feeling like I couldn't say, oh, I'm having a rough day, or I failed at this, or I got a paper rejected, or whatever. And I'm down, or my kids are sick, or I'm struggling with this. And the deepest, most enriching part of medicine for the last 5 years has been the relationships I have with other people I work with, because I've been courageous enough to say, I'm having a hard day, or I struggled yesterday. I did a case and nothing I did went well, and I couldn't get the art line, and I couldn't get central line. We had terrible access, and then blah, blah, whatever. Those are the things that I feel like I have found connection with my colleagues more in the last 5 years. And it's not because I have all this success. It's because I'm vulnerable enough to be real and share my struggles. So I think we have to remember that we need one another. And, healthcare is hard. Medicine is really a hard career to be in. And we have to just get rid of the shame piece and just get back to being humans with one another.
Oh, that's a sort of a perfect conclusion to everything that you've written and what we've discussed, because, Women in Echo was created with that in mind, that we need a little space, a safe space to be able to talk about these things without feeling that shame piece or embarrassed, and how important that is for keeping everyone still, like, okay, you might think you're crazy, because you're the only one, but you're not the only one.
Right.
That we're, as a collective, we are having similar experiences, and we have to be there for each other. It's not always been like that you could even talk openly.
Right.
I think what you've done with your company, and the Brave Enough, the podcast, and all the lectures you've done, I think really speaks profoundly to that. I think that is really something that we needed, and we continue to need. We still need it.
Thank you. Well, I hope so. It's, I really hope people know that how much I want them to, all of you, to stay in healthcare, and how much I look up to so many of you, especially that work in the realm of cardiology and in echocardiography, because there's so few women. And I know it's hard, and it's hard work. It's hard work.
Yeah. We have one last question from Karen. Sonographers are being pushed over the edge of what they can do and becoming broken or leaving the field. What do we do about that?
Yeah. I think we just have to be really, I think, Matt, we have to change, and we have to change our work flexibility. I know we are undergoing a huge renovation right now in our department, because we've had so many people leave, and what we used to do wasn't working. So it doesn't work anymore. So we have to figure out, how do we have flexible work environments? How do we have flexible work scheduling? How do we allow people to work in ways that are okay for them? The only way we're going to do that is only if we do that will we keep people in medicine. If we don't change quick, we're going to lose more people. So I don't have any great answers on how to do that, but I think we have to be nimble, and we have to be flexible to change the way that we're working. Thank you for having me, everyone.
Yeah.
And thank you for that comment. It's hard.
I think it is hard. One thing, Karen, I just wanted to say, to tag on, is we are discussing how to make the workflow for sonographers different. So taking a 3D image over 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then reconstructing 2D from the 3D to shorten the duration that you will be scanning, is a real priority, something that we are working on, just so you know. So with that, we are at the hour, and I just want to thank again all of you for being here, and for Sasha, good luck with everything, with your book, with all of your work on this advocacy that you're doing on behalf of all of us. And we're so grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.